At dawn backstage at an abandoned theater on Jackson Street, Seattle was damp and cold, and a musty smell rose from the wooden floor. I wore a headlamp, turning over each board still usable for my small workshop, when a woman in a navy suit, umbrella in hand, stopped a few steps from me. "Are you Maya Ellison?" "Yes." She set a business card on an old paint can. "I represent the estate of Mr. Arthur Belmont." I clenched my gloved hands, sawdust clinging to my hoodie. "You've got the wrong person." "Not wrong. We need to talk this morning." 3 months earlier, I had signed the divorce papers at the King County Courthouse, left the apartment with 2 boxes, and slept in the car parked near the Duwamish River. I showered at the gym, bought cheap coffee at the corner store, and lived by salvaging old wood, sanding it down, and selling it at the Fremont weekend market. I owed no one and had nothing left to lose. I was just trying to get through each day neatly. The woman opened her briefcase and set an envelope on the rotted wooden table. "Mr. Arthur Belmont passed away last week. The will names you as heir to all personal assets and the controlling stake in Belmont Studio. The attached condition: within 30 days, you must agree to sit in the chief executive officer's seat for at least 1 year. If you refuse, the assets will transfer to a contingency fund, and the company will have the right to sell it." I looked straight at her. "Why me?" "He left a handwritten letter. At 9 this morning, the law office will read it to you." A draft blew through the broken doorframe. I heard the early train down the slope. I pulled off my gloves, slipped the headlamp into my bag, and brushed the dust from my hands. "All right, I'll go. But today I need a shower, decent clothes, and a bus ticket downtown." She nodded. "I'll drive you. There's also a key to a temporary apartment." I locked the toolbox, pulled down the rusty shutter, and looked back at the pile of boards I had just chosen. I didn't know whether I was in reality or just a dream. 3 months ago, I had gotten back up to keep living. Now I stood before the chance to accept an appointment that could change my whole life. "Let's go," I said, opening the umbrella and stepping out into the rain. In the lawyer's car heading downtown, I leaned my head against the window and remembered how small I had become in the marriage that had just ended. I graduated in architecture from UW, holding a diploma that still smelled of fresh ink, and told Derek, "I want to study for my licensure exam this year." He smiled, rubbed my shoulder as if soothing a child. "You don't need to rush to work. I can provide for our life. Just enjoy it. We'll go to Santa Barbara this weekend." I said, "Then after this trip, I'll register for the exam." But when we got back, he booked more tickets to visit friends in Austin. The exam date had to be chosen weeks in advance. I opened the registration page and was halfway through when he called. I bought the tickets. Surprise. I closed the laptop. The next month was the same. "You can take the exam anytime," he said. "Don't let pressure ruin your youth." The strange signs appeared without noise. One morning, his phone had a new passcode. I asked. He answered curtly. It made me change it. His shirt smelled of a perfume that wasn't mine. "A new colleague sits close by. It must have rubbed off," he said, then laughed and told me not to be sensitive. The team-building nights multiplied. Thursday, then Friday, then even Tuesday. He came home late, texted "in a meeting," then went silent. I set the dinner, packed it up, put it in the fridge, and the next morning threw half of it away because it had spoiled. I reminded him, "First Friday we still go to the gallery, right?" He nodded for the sake of nodding, then disappeared that very evening. The day the illusion broke came as simply as a door opening at the wrong time. I brought food to his office because he had texted, "Starving, save me." The receptionist said, "Mr. Derek is meeting in the third-floor lounge. You can go up." I opened the door and saw him sitting very close to a female colleague, his hand on her knee, both whispering and laughing. There was no scene. I froze for a second, set the food container on the table, and said quietly, "Don't hurry, I'm going home." At home, I asked bluntly, "Are you involved with her?" He looked down at his hands, then gave a thin smile. "You're overreacting. It's just a bit of closeness." I opened my phone and showed him the photo the receptionist had taken for me as I left, because I had asked, "Please take me up. I need evidence." He fell silent. An hour later, he admitted, "Yes. I wasn't going to tell you because I didn't want to hurt you." I looked straight at him. "You already did." The prenup we signed before the wedding lay in the second drawer. Back then, I listened to him. "This is just paperwork to keep things clear. I'll take care of you." That paper said I had no claim to his separate assets and investment gains, no support if we split. I had no grounds to sue for anything. I left the rented house in his name with one suitcase, a laptop, and 16 sketchbooks I'd drawn in over the years. He stood in the doorway, sounding like a man who had run out of things to say. "Do you want me to transfer you anything?" I answered, "No, I just want my own keys back." I set the house keys on the table, took the car keys, and shut the door. No wavering. A week later, I learned to sleep in the car in a lot near the Duwamish River where a few RVs were parked long-term. I bought the cheapest monthly gym membership to shower every morning. I rented a 5x10 mini storage unit in Georgetown to use as a workshop. I picked up pallets and scrap wood from job sites, pulled nails, sanded, and reassembled them into small tables, benches, and simple shelves. I posted in the buy-sell groups around Fremont and Ballard. "Reclaimed wood coffee table, $40. Pickup only." People messaged. I replied immediately, set up to meet at the Fremont weekend market lot. I hauled pieces by car, tied them down tight, and pushed them slowly into the vendor area. Sales were slow at first. I adjusted the price, added clearer photos, and learned to speak briefly. "This is old pine, planed smooth, finished with oil. It can handle light moisture." In the evenings after cleaning the workshop, I sat in a corner under a warm light and opened a sketchbook. I drew a community center with a shared kitchen, a neighborhood library with low shelves for children, a row of temporary rooms with lockers for the unhoused. I knew I didn't yet have my license, but my hands remembered proportion, remembered how to place light in doorways so a space could breathe. I wrote in the margin, "If there's a lot by a bus stop, place the reading room near the entrance so newcomers won't hesitate." One night, heavy rain leaked through the warehouse roof. I set a bin under the drip and wrote on the first page of the 17th notebook, "No one saves me but me. Wake early tomorrow." I learned to eat cheaply but adequately. Flour, eggs, frozen vegetables, discounted apples. I learned to choose second-hand but solid items at Goodwill. I said no to everything else. Every time I faltered, I hit a timer and ran laps around the lot for 15 minutes so my head wouldn't explode. I didn't talk on and on. I called my mother once a week and said, "I'm okay." I didn't want to hear "come home" because I knew I could stand on my own if I didn't fall back into relying on someone. The vendors at the Fremont market began to recognize me. Jean, who sold candles, said, "You've set up well today." I smiled and thanked her. A young couple asked, "Can this table support a small fish tank?" I explained how I had reinforced the legs and stretcher. They bought it, paid cash, and slipped me a small tip. "We like how honest you are." I went back to the storage unit and recorded carefully. Table number 14, sold $45, materials $12, profit $33. Every night I reviewed the notebook, not to pat myself on the back, but to know what to do tomorrow. I made a need-to-learn list, register for the exam again, study each section, ask contacts at my old school how to borrow a studio room when I needed models. I emailed a former professor. I want to take the exam this year. I need study materials and a support schedule. He replied, "Good. Come by Thursday." I added to the calendar. Thursday, 10 a.m., room A201. I started helping a small church rebuild some old shelves in its community corner. The priest gave me a key, trusting me after I showed up on time twice and finished what I promised. I set the shelves straight, anchored them solidly to the wall, kept the level bubble centered, and swept up every wood shaving before leaving. He handed me an envelope, $60 inside. I said, "Thank you, Father." He said, "Maya, you work with a steady hand." Once in a while, Derek sent a short text like, "You okay?" I didn't reply. Not out of anger, but because I was busy making my life okay without the person who had knocked it off balance. One evening, I got a call from an unknown number, a male voice introducing himself from a brokerage. "Do you want to sell interior designs cheap?" I laughed. "I don't sell cheap. I sell what I make." I hung up and went back to the board I was planning. Every morning, I brewed coffee with a small secondhand pour-over, sat on the storage unit's stoop, and watched the traffic. I saw a rhythm of life I hadn't noticed before. Many people like me, self-made, self-sufficient, hauling goods to market. I realized my hands weren't weak. I realized my mind was clearer when I didn't have to explain to anyone why I needed a silent day to study. I connected with a volunteer group that repairs homes for low-income residents and asked to tag along to learn to do things to code. They let me carry nails, clean up sites, and watch the lead carpenters measure. I wrote in the notebook, "When replacing a window, foam must be packed to the right density so it doesn't warp. Don't skimp on screws." That was when, at dawn in the abandoned theater, I was bending to pick up a soundboard, hands dusty with sawdust, and the woman in the navy suit arrived. When she set down the business card and said, "The estate of Mr. Arthur Belmont," I thought it was a mistake. But every detail that followed was too specific for a mistake. "Reading the letter at 9 this morning," she said. I nodded. Said I needed a shower, clean clothes, and a bus fare downtown. She said, "I'll drive you." I locked the workshop, grabbed my tool bag out of habit, then put it in her trunk. "It's okay. You can leave that," she said. I looked at the old corrugated metal lock, thought of the cold nights already past, the market days I'd stood through, the notes I'd taped up. I told myself a line I'd written on the first page of the 17th notebook. "No one saves me but me, and if life threw a hard pitch just as I was getting back on my feet, I would catch it with both hands, eyes open, feet planted." I sat down, buckled my seatbelt. "Let's go," I said. She nodded and started the engine. Seattle was still drizzling. I breathed slowly and felt I was no longer shrinking like I had in Derek's kitchen. I was breathing again. And now there was new work to do. At 9 in the morning, I sat in a small conference room at Park & Associates, the wooden tabletop gleaming, coffee just poured. The woman in the blue suit from the theater extended her hand. "Caroline Park. I'm the estate attorney for Mr. Arthur Belmont." She opened her briefcase, set down a gray file folder and a thick envelope. "Maya, before we read, I want to confirm. Arthur was your sponsor when you were in high school, correct?" I nodded. "He took me into his home for a few summers, gave me an internship at the studio, gave me a scholarship to apply to UW." Caroline drew a short breath and read each item clearly. "Under the notarized will, Mr. Arthur Belmont leaves you a brownstone on the Upper West Side, Manhattan, a workshop and materials warehouse, several rental properties, and a controlling interest in Belmont Studio of Architecture, BSA. The accompanying condition: within 30 days from today, You must accept the position of interim CEO and maintain an executive role for at least 12 months. If you refuse or fail to meet the condition, all assets and shares will transfer to the American Architecture Fund. I asked bluntly, "Did he say why he chose me?" Caroline handed me an envelope with a handwritten letter. The familiar script. "Maya, if you're reading this, it means you have gotten back up. We don't need someone perfect. We need someone who stays in the drafting room until the lights go out. BSA needs someone who keeps promises to spaces and to people. You may not yet have your license, but you have a straight back. The rest can be learned." I set the letter down and looked at Caroline. "If I accept, will I have legal and operational support?" "Yes. The board has approved a 90-day transition support package. I'll take you to meet the CFO, the head of HR, and the board secretary." She paused a beat. "Maya, I know you've been through a lot these past 3 months. I'm not here to force you. I'm here to present the choice just as Arthur wished." I took a sip of water. "I accept," I said slowly. "Not for the money, because I want to return to the profession." Caroline nodded as if she'd been waiting for that. "Good. This afternoon we fly to New York. I've arranged a 2-week temporary apartment near the studio. Before we go, I need you to sign 2 acknowledgments. One is consent to the will's conditions. The other is a temporary power of attorney for me to handle the initial formalities." I read every line carefully, asked a few questions about scope and duration, then signed. "One more thing," Caroline said, sliding a small box toward me. "Keys to the brownstone, 257 West 78th, and an old elevator key up to the attic level." The afternoon flight brought us to JFK near sundown. A car from the firm was waiting. I looked out the window as we turned into the Upper West Side. Stoops, trees, people walking their dogs. Number 257 stood there, unruffled. The door opened before we rang. An older woman with straight shoulders and neatly tied silver hair stepped out. "Maya." "I'm Maya." She smiled, eyes a little wet. "June Green here. Mr. Belmont's housekeeper for decades. He never stopped believing you would come back." I hugged her. A real hug, not for show. June led us inside, her hand not leaving the door until I had fully stepped through. The first floor held the living room and dining room, the smells of old wood and clean soap. June pointed to a small frame on the piano, a photo of me at 17, standing before a cardboard model of a community library. "He kept it here," she said. I swallowed. Caroline set her briefcase on the table, said she would return in the morning with the schedule. "Rest tonight. Tomorrow at 9, meet the CFO and HR at the studio." June took me up the narrow staircase, the wooden steps creaking very softly. "He fixed the old elevator for you but said, 'Let it only go up to the 5th floor and down to the 1st. She laughed. "He said, 'Maya will like taking the stairs, but late at night let the elevator serve my girl.'" I laughed through tears. The 2nd, 3rd, and 4th floors were a bedroom, a study, a small dining room in turn. At the 5th floor, June stopped, pulled out the elevator key, and opened a sliding glass door. "He called this the light room," she said. I stepped in and stood still. The whole floor was a glass-walled studio flooded with light. A large drafting table sat by the window. Task lamp, tall stool, drawer units labeled materials, models, tools. On a rail hung the sketch with which I'd won my senior year prize. He had it printed large, set in a simple wooden frame, hung directly opposite the drafting table. Beside it was a thick pinboard with his notes. "Reading nook for children must be under 18 inches. North light for even illumination. Maya, remember to drink water." I touched the edge of the frame. My palm went cool against the glass. I cried. Not for the assets, not for the CEO title. Because for the first time in a long time, I was being seen as who I am and what I want to do. June handed me a small wooden box. He said this was to be left on Maya's desk. Inside were a new technical pen, a steel ruler, and a sheet of paper folded in thirds. His handwriting. On the day you step into this room, just begin with a straight line. That first line doesn't have to be beautiful. It only has to be true. I sat down, opened the drawer, and found blank notebooks, tracing paper, pencils of every grade laid out. I turned on the desk lamp, pulled open the models drawer. There were utility knives, glue, foam board, even little offcuts of wood pre-cut. Nothing showy. Just a decent place to work, waiting for someone to come back. Caroline spoke from the doorway. I've left tomorrow's schedule on the desk. 8:15 car pickup. 9 Akalasasha meet the CFO. 10 Kadasasa HR. 11 Sasha and the board secretary. 12:30 lunch with the design team lead. 2 Harsha visit the shop. She looked at the frame sketch and smiled. Arthur hung it the day you won the prize. He sent me a photo every time he changed a bulb up here. I nodded, unable to say anything. Caroline added, if you can't sleep tonight, go down to the kitchen. June makes excellent chicken stew. June made up a fresh set of sheets in the third-floor bedroom and handed me a thick towel. Go shower, I've set out a robe. When I came out, hair still wet, June set a bowl of chicken stew on the small dining table with a slice of bread. Eat. You'll feel better. I finished it, warmth returning to my stomach. Thank you, I said. June just smiled. You have many people to meet tomorrow. Sleep early. Before going to bed, I climbed up to the light room once more. I opened a notebook and drew a first straight line, as he'd said. It trembled slightly, but it was mine. I wrote beneath it, I accept. Day 1. City lights reflected through the glass. I switched off the lamp, slid the glass door closed, and went down. On the third-floor landing, I paused, looked again at the photo of me at 17, and told myself, tomorrow at 9, go into BSA not to prove anything, but to work. I pulled up the covers, set the alarm for 6:30, and put my phone on silent. Before sleeping, I texted an old friend in New York. I'm back. If you have time, coffee next week. For now, I need to sleep so I can meet his company, and mine, tomorrow morning. The next morning, I walked into BSA, not to prove anything, but to work. I arrived earlier than the car pickup time, holding a hot coffee and a blank notebook. The baptism took place in the conference room on the 12th floor. A long table, leather chairs, a large screen gone black. Caroline introduced everyone and paused at 2 important faces. Liam Archer, senior partner. The salt and pepper-haired man shook my hand firmly. Welcome, Maya. I appreciate you being early. To his right was Victor Lang, a board member, striped tie, eyes looking through me as if through a window frame. Victor, he said briefly. I nodded. Very pleased to meet you. Caroline opened the meeting. Objective. Transition operations per the will. Set a new cadence over 90 days. I stood up. No slides. Just opened my notebook. I'll be direct, I began. I don't know everything, but I learn fast. I respect each person's expertise and need the strong people to stay. I also need to give creative freedom back to the design team. In the first 90 days, we'll do 4 things. 1. Return decision-making to close to the project teams. 2. Establish transparent rules for hours, fees, and scope changes. 3. Make sustainability a mandatory priority, not decoration. 4. Allocate some hours to socially impactful projects, little libraries, community centers, emergency shelters, with clear accounting. Liam leaned forward. In terms of governance, what does returning authority look like to you? I pointed to a simple diagram on paper. Each project has an architect of record responsible for the technical seal, a project manager responsible for the budget, and a client coordinator. Those three have decision rights within an approved framework. Legal and finance supervise by milestone and do not intervene in details unless thresholds are exceeded. Victor lifted his chin. And you, what is the CEO's function if you keep returning authority? I kept my voice even. I set standards, clear bottlenecks, protect the team from unreasonable pressure, and take ultimate responsibility. I don't draw in place of the signer. I make sure the signer has enough time and resources to do it right. Victor tapped his pen. You don't have a professional license. That bothers some people. I nodded. Correct. I'm registering for exam dates this week. In the meantime, all technical filings will be signed by the current responsible architects, in accordance with the law. The CEO's role is to run the firm, not to sign drawings personally. Are we clear? Liam interjected, calm. Clear. Go on. I spoke about transparency rules. Starting this month, each project submits a short report every 2 weeks. Scope, hours, changes, risks. Keep it short. Factual. No pageantry. Someone chuckled softly. I looked around. If anyone objects, say so now. No one spoke. I concluded. This week there's an open crit Friday at 4 p.m. Whoever's free, come listen and give exactly 15 minutes of feedback on the community project we'll take pro bono this quarter. Liam said, I'm in. That afternoon, my team and I went to the large conference room to meet the first client under the new tenure. GreenFjord, a fund developing a headquarters campus in Seattle. They wanted a building that breathes, not a form race, but comfortable, efficient, easy to operate. Just before we went in, an assistant rushed up. The presentation file is corrupted. All the slides have broken fonts, images gone. It ran over. Last access was from the internal account v.lang at 10:12. I looked at Caroline. She gave a very slight nod, as if noting it. I folded my laptop and pushed it aside. We don't need slides, I told the team. Bring pens. Open the board. The clients entered. I introduced myself briefly and gave them the best seats. You want a building that breathes, I began, standing beside the whiteboard. I won't start with technology. I'll start with the people who use it every day. I sketched a simple plan, a few masses. In the morning, staff arrive from the parking lot or the bus stop. Here is the lobby, with benches and real plants. No need for a giant air conditioner. The core has small light wells to bring in even daylight. Windows can open, but with limited travel for safety. In the middle is a shared kitchen with a long table, filtered water, and a sink. On the roof is a light garden to cut heat. Each floor has a quiet nook for focused work and an open area for teamwork. I separated with colored pens: air, water, light, flow of people. I connected arrows, where the wind moves through, how rainwater is gathered, how light comes in without glare, and how many steps it is from the parking spot to the desk. A GreenFjord member asked, how much does capital cost increase if we do a green roof? I answered directly, a small initial bump, but lower summer cooling costs and longer membrane life. We'll provide 2 options with specific numbers in a preliminary report next week. Another asked, is it hard to clean operable windows? I answered, we'll limit the opening angle and the technical team will set an appropriate cleaning schedule. The goal is for users to have the right to open when needed, not to depend on equipment all the time. I drew an additional section indicating where to place daylighted stairways to encourage walking, and where to put small meeting rooms so they don't eat up the commons. We want a campus that's usable on rainy days, sunny days, and even during a 1-hour power outage. I said. That's what breathing means in practice. Faces across the table softened. Someone nodded, turned to a colleague. I get what she means. The lead concluded. I want a design principles document in 5 days. If it aligns, we'll sign the preliminary funding. I shook hands. We'll deliver on time. When the clients left, the whole room exhaled as if after a 5K. Liam allowed a rare half smile. Good. Someone on the team whispered, won it barehanded. I didn't smile much. I looked at Caroline and signaled for a private room. She led me, Liam, and Victor into a small conference room. Caroline set a thin stack of papers on the table. It has just confirmed. The account Vidalang accessed the GreenFjord file at 10:12, changed fonts and deleted images. The history shows a workstation on premises, not a remote login. Victor leaned back in his chair. We're accusing me based on a system error? I looked straight at him. I'm not accusing. I'm proposing 2 options to protect the firm and everyone in it. 1. You voluntarily step down from the board, terminate all system access within 24 hours, and the firm buys back your shares at an independent valuation within 30 days. We sign a mutual non-disparagement and a 12-month no solicit of BSA clients. 2. We open an internal investigation, suspend you immediately, preserve evidence, and refer it to authorities if there are indicators of violations. The matter could drag on and damage your reputation and the firm's. I don't want length. I need an organization that can work. Victor let out a short laugh. A newcomer dares to set terms. Liam placed his hand on the table, voice calm but firm. Victor, don't misread this. These aren't personal terms. This is the protection of the firm. I support the CEO. Carolyn added, and I will carry out the proper legal process for whichever option you choose. You have 48 hours to respond. In the meantime, your system access has been temporarily locked. Victor stood, his chair scraping back with a dry sound. I need to speak to my attorney. Caroline nodded. We'll wait for 48 hours. He stepped out, the door closed. I let my shoulders loosen. Liam looked at me. You just did what many people are afraid to do. Keep that tempo, I said. I don't want revenge. I want the rest to be able to work. He nodded. That's why Arthur chose you. That night, I returned to the brownstone and went up to the light room. I drew a small box in the corner of the board. GreenFjord, 5 days, principles. Beneath it were 3 lines: air, water, light, flow. And 1 additional line: cost, operations, maintenance. I switched on the lamp and drew a new straight line. Tomorrow the team would have a clear board to keep moving, no slides needed. We had gotten through the first day the way work should be done: say it clearly, draw it clearly, sign it clearly. And if anyone tangles things up, I will untangle them with process, not with volume. The next morning, I brought coffee into a small meeting room and stuck a large sheet of paper on the wall. Ellison Fellowship, paid apprenticeship. Liam sat down, leaned in to read. HR, the CFO, and 2 design team leads were present. I spoke plainly. I want to launch a program for students and career changers. Don't make them fetch coffee. Give them real work, pay real wages, and let them see Arthur's failed drafts, so they know greatness also starts with many crossed-out lines. The CFO asked, what kind of budget? 10 spots, 3 months each. A basic living wage for New York. We'll seek additional support from Arthur's fund and a community college. Goal: after 3 months, each person has a proper portfolio, a mentor, and a next internship. Liam nodded. Agreed. My condition is site safety training and strict time discipline. Done, I said. Day 1, safety. Day 2, reading drawings. Day 3. Visit the shop. June brought up a box of old files and set it on the table. He called this pile Lessons Paid For Cheaply. The options that weren't chosen. The notes saying, "Don't do it like this again." I flipped to a sketch with Arthur's red ink note. Window set at the wrong height. The person seated can't see the trees. I told everyone, "We'll hang these sheets in the apprenticeship room. Cover client names if needed, but keep his handwriting." The youngest team lead laughed. "Seeing this makes me breathe easier. Turns out everyone once drew badly." I nodded. "Right. Our job is to show the next generation the roads to avoid, not just flaunt the winning paths." I slid over another sheet. Public Benefit Project Haven Hubs. The whole room looked up. This is a cluster of small temporary dwellings on a vacant lot near a bus line. Safe beds, a skills classroom, a shared kitchen, code-compliant bathrooms, and a community garden. We'll design it so the community can operate it without heavy expense. Each hub houses 12 people with lockable storage and a weekend job counseling desk. HR asked, "Who operates it?" "We partner with a local organization. We handle design and assembly guidance, not operations." Liam opened his notebook. "The city will ask about cost. We'll provide 2 packages, a basic kit assembled from standard materials, and an upgrade when there's funding. I'll meet the borough commissioner next week." I added, looking the team in the eye, "Our architecture doesn't just build what's beautiful, it builds the chance for a beautiful life. That's my manifesto for the year." In the afternoon, comms reported, "PBS wants to make a documentary about architecture that changes lives. They want to follow BSA for 6 months." I sat with Caroline, the communications lead, and 2 producers. The lead producer, Maria, opened. "We're not chasing sensational stories. We want to see a studio doing real work and how a public interest project touches people's lives." I drew the boundary clearly. I'll share enough to heal and to give viewers one concrete takeaway. I won't share details that harm anyone, and I won't name a toxic past. The center of the story is Arthur, his patience, and the path of getting back up to do the work right. Maria nodded. "Then we'll film the Ellison Fellowship sessions, follow Haven Hubs, and a bit of GreenFjord behind the scenes. We'll need consent forms from everyone in frame." Caroline added, "No filming email screens, no recording legal meetings, no pointing cameras at anyone who doesn't want to appear." Maria agreed immediately. "Deal." I called June. "Do you have any of his old videotapes?" June smiled. "A few reels. He filmed job sites and scenes of students visiting the house. He said to give them only to someone who understands what he called this, patience compounded." We previewed a clip that evening. Arthur stood beside a model, pointed to a very small corner, and said to the camera, "If you rotate this table 3 inches, the person sitting will see someone else coming in, and then no one is left out." I hit pause. This is what I want PBS to see. Meticulousness for people, not garnish. On the day we announced the Ellison Fellowship, I stood in the light room and started an internal live stream. "BSA is opening 10 paid apprenticeship spots," I said. "Priority for seniors, career changers, and people whose studies were interrupted by life circumstances. Submit 1 hand sketch, a 60-second audio clip about a space that lets you breathe, and 1 reference. No need for a high GPA. We need a serious learning attitude." The chat lit up. An employee asked, "Will anyone internally mentor?" "Yes," I said. "Each fellow gets a technical mentor and a life mentor. The technical mentor teaches the craft. The life mentor helps them survive in this city." In the afternoon, I held a video call with a community college in Queens. The principal said, "Many of our students work night shifts. We'll schedule to fit their shifts, I replied. They can do 3 days a week, 6 hours a day. The remaining days are for study and rest. The CFO nodded, taking notes. Liam suggested one more item: a site safety exam and a session on labor rights. Put it in week 1, I decided. Haven hubs began on a lot near the church where I once installed bookshelves. I called the priest and described the idea. He listened and answered slowly. The people sleeping out there need a safe place to breathe. If you can do this, I'll help rally folks. We met the borough commissioner on the lot and staked out wooden markers for each block. A social worker asked, "Is there lockable storage and hot showers?" "Yes," I said. I used to shower at a gym every morning. I know hot water isn't a luxury. People looked at one another, silent for a moment, then nodded. At night, I received an email from PBS. Preliminary shooting outline. I read it and saw a line asking about Maya's marital past. I called Maria immediately. "Cut that section. It's irrelevant. I'm not turning private life into content for others." Maria said, "Understood. We'll focus on the work, Arthur, and the people who get to learn and to have housing." I thanked her and sent the revision to Caroline. A week later, the 5th floor of the brownstone had a new bulletin board. Photos of Arthur's failed drafts labeled "Lesson Learned," the Fellows' weekly class schedule, and a big line pasted across: "Architecture doesn't just build what's beautiful, it builds the chance for a beautiful life." A prospective fellow came to a trial interview carrying a drawing of a public park restroom. He said, "I didn't go to a big school. I've worked on sites for 3 years. I want to learn to draw correctly so the restroom actually smells clean." I smiled. "Sit down and tell me why you placed the sink here." He spoke slowly, without fancy words. I saw myself a dozen years ago, and I saw Arthur nodding somewhere. At day's end, Liam stepped into the light room, looked around. "You move fast," he said. I replied, "Fast but without leaving people behind." He nodded and pointed at the Haven Hub sketch. "I'm joining the detail review on this." "Thank you," I said. My phone buzzed. Caroline texted, "Victor chose the exit option. His lawyer wants to meet about the share buyback. 9 a.m. tomorrow." I exhaled briefly. Good. I switched off the lights and drew the curtains. The city outside was still loud, but the house was quiet. I knew tomorrow and the coming weeks would bring hard work. But now I had an apprenticeship to launch, a hub to build, a documentary to keep on focus, and one line I would repeat to everyone who walks into this room. The first straight line doesn't have to be pretty. It just has to be true. The message popped up at 6:42 a.m. while I was making coffee. "We should talk." Derek's number. I looked at it for exactly 5 seconds, didn't reply, hit block. A minute later, an email landed in the Press Belmont inbox. "Maya, I just want to end things amicably." I forwarded it to Caroline with a one-word subject: block. She called back immediately. "Got it. Don't respond. I'll handle it." By 9 o'clock, Lena from HR stepped into the light room. 2 fellows reported LinkedIn messages from Derek. Content invites them to grab coffee to learn the truth about Maya, plus a vague line about copyright on old ideas. I said, "Collect screenshots, timestamps, links. No one is to reply. Send straight to Caroline." I flipped on the team protection protocol on the board. Nick 1. Report directly to HR and legal. 2. Download copies of messages. 3. No engagement. 4. If called, log time and number. 5. Single point of contact, Caroline. At noon, Caroline sent a draft cease and desist letter. She read it to me line by line, voice steady. "Mr. Derek Cole, this is a formal demand that you immediately cease and desist from any direct or indirect contact with employees, trainees, clients, and partners of Belmont Studio. Any false statements, threats, or disruptive outreach will be recorded and referred to the appropriate authorities. Personal disputes are outside the company's purview. You have been notified. I said, "Send it. Also update the internal alert." She replied, "Sent. Delivery receipt received. I've also flagged LinkedIn and saved the reference code." In the afternoon, I held a quick meeting with the 10 fellows. I kept it brief. If anyone contacts you to badmouth me or the company, don't reply. Let the adults handle that. Your job is to learn and do. One of them raised a hand. "I'm a little scared." I nodded. "Fear is normal. But you're not alone. HR is one floor down. Legal is at that extension right there. I'm here. No one is allowed to use social media to derail your focus." I looked at each face and added, "Thank you for reporting early. That's professional." Toward evening, LinkedIn reported Derek's account had been temporarily locked for terms violations. I sat down, not trembling the way I used to. Not because I'd won, but because there's a protective process. I no longer have to stand alone. I texted Naomi, an old friend in Seattle. "One thing handled." She replied, "Proud of you. Go eat dinner." The next day, after the GreenFjord meeting, Liam stopped by the light room. He set a box of sandwiches on the table. "I remembered you hadn't eaten yet." I opened the box and smiled. "Thank you." He leaned against the edge of the table, not encroaching. "Caroline told me about Derek. I know it's not easy. I'm here if you need someone to sit in silence beside you." I looked at him. "Thank you for using the word silence." He nodded. "I'm learning." We ate in silence for a while, the sound of knives and cutting boards drifting up from the kitchen below. Liam set down his glass of water, drew a breath. "I want to say something, with respect for our boundaries and roles." He looked straight at me, no detours. "I see you, not the title. The person who rebuilt her life one small step at a time. I won't control. I won't pull. I only want to co-create, if one day you allow it. If not, I remain here as a trustworthy colleague." I was quiet for a few seconds, letting my heart catch up to my head. "I need my own cadence," I said slowly. "I need time not to decide anything out of fear or emptiness." He nodded immediately, without trying to persuade me. "I'll wait. And while I wait, I'll ensure there's no conflict of interest. I'll voluntarily recuse myself from any direct decisions involving you, and if one day we both want to try, we'll follow proper HR procedure. No secrecy." I exhaled, lighter. "Thank you for saying it clearly." He smiled. "Clarity means no one has to guess." That afternoon, I emailed HR. Note professional boundaries with Liam Archer. No direct reporting. All approvals via Caroline or the CFO. No one-on-one meetings after hours. If a meeting is needed, a third person present. HR replied, "Noted." I printed the email and filed it under boundaries. I wasn't ashamed to do it. It helps me keep cadence and protects everyone. In the evening, PBS dropped by to film 30 minutes in the Ellison Fellowship class. Maria stood in the corner and asked quietly, "Would you like to say something at the end?" I nodded. "Just one line." When the camera rolled, I told the fellows, "If anyone has ever said you're not good enough to be here, let your work answer. And if anyone touches your learning space, we will stand in front of you. Learn for real. Build for real." The camera cut, and Maria said, "That line stays." Right after, my phone buzzed. "Caroline." Derek replied to the letter with a brief apology, promising no further contact. "I'll keep monitoring. If he relapses, we escalate." Me. "Understood." I stepped out onto the balcony and took a long breath. The city was loud, but I wasn't being dragged by it. I texted June. Do you still have chicken pot pie? Yes. Come down and eat. In the kitchen, June ladled me a bowl of soup. She looked at me longer than usual. Maya, you look different today. I asked. Different how? You don't shrink when the phone rings. I laughed. I'm learning not to let the ring set the pace. She touched my shoulder. Arthur would be glad. Late at night, I went back to the light room, switched on the desk lamp, and wrote in my notebook. Cease and desist, sent and in effect. Fellows, safe. Liam, boundaries clear. I drew a small box and wrote, 1 no, then another box, 1 yes. No letting someone from the past step into the new circle. Yes, to letting those who respect it step to the edge at the right time, in the right way. Before lights out, I sent Liam a short message. Thank you for letting me keep the pace. He replied a minute later. Your pace is the one we honor. Tomorrow at 8:30, you have a call with the borough commissioner. I moved a meeting so you can use the big room. Sleep early. I texted back. Understood. Good night. I closed the notebook, drew the curtains, turned off the light. The feeling in my chest wasn't swaying anymore. Not because someone was there, but because I'd learned how to set boundaries and let others respect them. And as I walked down the dark hallway to my bedroom, I could hear the sound of my own footsteps, steady, sure, just enough. When the old life cycle closed by law and procedure, a new challenge knocked, an acquisition offer. Carolyn forwarded me an email proposing a private meeting at a restaurant in Midtown. Sender, Chen Lutz Morris Atelier. They are a sharp rival, adept at fashionable projects. I went with Caroline and Liam. Round table, white cloths, a server pouring water. Mr. Chen opened. We've followed BSA for years. We want to buy it outright, keep the Belmont brand, let you rest while still serving as an honorary advisor. Ms. Morris slid a thin packet across. These are the numbers. We can close in 60 days. Caroline looked at me without a word. I skimmed it, noted the terms. Buyout, retain a few staff, switch off the public interest programs for 12 months to restructure. I folded the packet and set it down. Thank you, I said clearly. This legacy is not for sale. Ms. Morris smiled like someone who already knew the answer but still tried. You could use that money to do anything you want, wherever you like. I shook my head. What I want is here. I want architecture to serve more people. We just opened an apprenticeship and are building the Haven hubs. Not a fit for you. Chen arched an eyebrow. Are you sure? You've just taken the seat. Liam cut in, voice even. The answer is clear. Caroline gathered the documents and slid them back. The meeting ended in only 15 minutes. Outside the restaurant, Caroline told me. Arthur would smile. Back at the office, Caroline handed me a narrow envelope with an old wax seal. Mr. Arthur instructed that it be opened only if you refuse an acquisition offer. I cracked the wax and pulled out the paper. His familiar hand. If you choose the mission over money, the Eleanor Fund will open. Use it for apprenticeships and public interest works. No advertising strings. Do not disclose the amount. Beneath it lay a plain, round ring, matte gold, engraved with a small E. June stood beside me and whispered. Ms. Eleanor was a 1950s architect, Arthur's mentor. She gave him this ring the day he refused to sell his studio to a large firm. He kept it until now. I held the ring, didn't put it on, just set it in my palm and closed my hand. I understood clearly what he was doing, not manipulating with a hidden reward, but building trust that I know how to choose a direction and take responsibility. News of the Chen plus Morris rejection spread quickly. Business reporters called for comment. I gave a fixed line. We're focused on the work at hand. No plans to sell. That night, I went up to the 5th floor, opened my notebook, and wrote concisely, Eleanor, open, for fellows and Haven hubs. I placed the ring in a small drawer beside the pen he left me. A month later, the past barged in by the old method. A summons. Derek sued, demanding a share of the marital assets in the form of the knowledge and relationships I accumulated in the marriage. He asked the court to value sketchbooks and congratulatory emails from a few professors, then proposed to split them. Carolyn read the complaint, furrowed her brow. Baseless claims, but we still have to respond. She drafted a reply. The prenup is valid. I received no support. Intellectual property of my own arising before and after the marriage. In addition, a packet of Derek's old emails telling me, don't go to work, delay exams for the family, and travel schedules wedged into the days I booked tests. She asked the court to require the former counselor to provide a memorandum confirming and describing controlling behavior. Derek's lawyer objected, but the judge allowed limited review. On the day of the short hearing, the courtroom was small, the lights bright, not noisy like in films. Derek sat on the other side in a new shirt, avoiding my gaze. Caroline presented briefly, submitting each piece of evidence in order. The prenup signed and notarized. Copies of emails saying, you don't need to work. Canceled exam dates with the plane tickets he booked on those very days. A counselor's note. Recommend client's right to pursue career. Partner to commit not to obstruct. The judge asked a few questions, looked over the file, then said succinctly, no basis, petition denied, with prejudice, meaning it cannot be refiled on the same grounds. Caroline inclined her head. Thank you, Your Honor. Out in the hallway, a few reporters waited. A microphone lifted. Ms. Maya, any comment? I looked straight into the lens, voice calm. I have work to do. The past is closed. I turned away. Not another word. Work pressed on. The Eleanor Fund activated. Part of it paired with city budgets to open application rounds for libraries, community centers, and new playgrounds. We proposed applying a simple set of principles: beautiful, sustainable, equitable. Beautiful doesn't mean expensive. It's harmonious proportion, light where it should be, materials easy to care for. Sustainable means low energy use, staying cool, harvesting rainwater, not pushing maintenance costs downstream. Equitable means everyone can use it: wheelchair users, elders, children. I went to meetings in 3 cities over 8 weeks: Tulsa, El Paso, Philadelphia. Everywhere there was an empty lot waiting to become a library or a playground. In Philadelphia, Emma Rodriguez, first cohort fellow, stood up in the meeting room, hands slightly trembling but speaking clearly. I'd like to take the lead on the Kensington Neighborhood Library. I grew up here. I understand what it means for a child to have a place to sit and read without being afraid of noise. I asked, do you have an 8-week plan? She nodded and handed over a chart. User surveys, 3 layout options, a 150 model, community meetings on Wednesday evenings. Liam looked at me and smiled. I said, approved. Sign the scope memo and choose a technical mentor. You have the right to revise the plan if community feedback says otherwise. Emma left the room, eyes bright. I lingered a few seconds, remembering myself at 17 in front of a cardboard model. I texted June. If Arthur were here, what would he point at? She replied, at the low windows so kids can see the trees. On groundbreaking day for the library, the sun was mild. Emma stood before the crew and read the day's plan. We work in teams of 3. Pair new with experienced. Water breaks 15 minutes every hour and a half. A boy passing by stopped to ask, Miss, will I be able to play chess in the library later? Emma smiled. Yes. There will be a low wooden table in that corner and a box for chess pieces. The next month, when the roof was up, elders came to try the seats. Parents pushed strollers in to see if the slope was too steep. Emma noted every comment and went back to the shop to adjust. I stood outside watching and wrote a single line in my notebook. Right person, right place, right time. 5 years passed faster than I expected. GreenFjord completed Phase 1. Haven hubs appeared in 3 boroughs, running tidy and clean. The Ellison Fellowship had gone through 4 cohorts. Many moved on, some stayed, some returned to teach, some joined other offices. PBS aired a 1-hour documentary. They gave it a very simple name, A Room That Works. No mention of private life, no fake crescendos. Just hands drawing, the sound of drills, the gaze of users. I watched and saw Arthur in a few old reels, saying, "Move the table 3 inches." And I laughed to myself. One afternoon in early June, I stood on the stage on the UW quad, clear skies, flags light. I had been invited to speak to the architecture graduating class. Liam sat in the front row, June beside him. Emma stood behind the student block in a green gown. I spoke slowly without florid language. There was a time I lost myself. I sat outside someone else's door, listening to people tell me who I had to be. Then one day, I understood something simple. Your essence does not disappear. It just waits for you to call it by its right name. When I called it by doing decent work every day, it came back. I looked down at the students, sunlight hitting the caps. You will be offered big numbers. You will be pulled into meeting rooms where people say, "This is how things work." Ask instead, "What am I building, and for whom?" If the answer makes you breathe easier, keep going. If the answer makes your chest feel heavy, change course. You don't need to win every contest. You only need not to lose to yourself. I closed. Architecture doesn't just build what's beautiful. It builds the chance to live beautifully. Bring that chance to the places that are often overlooked. I paused a beat. If one day you get lost, go back to the studio and draw a first straight line. It doesn't need to be beautiful. It only needs to be true. As I stepped down, Emma hugged me quickly and ran back to her row. Liam handed me a water bottle and whispered, "Proud." June dabbed her eyes, pretending it was dust. I looked at the Eleanor ring on my hand. I've worn it since the Kensington Library dedication, and thought that, in the end, Arthur's test wasn't in the numbers, but in how we used our days. I turned toward the gate, where kids on a school tour were calling to each other. "When will the next library open?" I told the teacher, "Soon." Then I went back in, because I still had a meeting about a playground in Tulsa. The work doesn't wait, and I'm ready. Late at night on the roof of the brownstone on the Upper West Side, the breeze is light, the city below evenly lit. I set the Eleanor ring next to our engagement ring, mine and Liam's, watching the 2 metal bands lie still like a full stop to the tumultuous years and the opening of a calmer new chapter. I fully understand the lesson Arthur left. No one can take away your ability to rebuild your own life. Bargain offers are never worth trading for the mission you believe in. And true love does not make you shrink. It leaves room for you to grow, work better, and live more uprightly. Tonight, I write only 3 lines in the notebook. Continue to keep the promises to the users of the projects. Continue to teach and learn in the Ellison Fellowship. Continue to call what I pursue by its right name. Tomorrow morning, we open another Haven hub. Emma cuts the ribbon at the library in Kensington, and the GreenFjord team receives the final principles. If you are at your lowest, don't try to beat anyone immediately. Stand up with one small act. Wash your hands. Turn on the light. Open the old notebook and redraw tomorrow's schedule. Tomorrow takes the shape of what you dare to do today. Thank you for staying to the end of this story, for patiently going through each small milestone with me. If anything in this journey has lightened your heart or given you more courage, leave a comment. In the next 48 hours, what is the one thing you will do to protect and rebuild yourself? I read them all. And if you want to see how the First Haven Hub opening operates, or how a fellow steps into a lead role while still keeping a healthy rhythm of life, stay with the channel. We will continue in a slow, clear, and kind way. Thank you. Truly.